I'm a senior product designer here at Entelect, and I've been pretty much in the design space for about almost 2 decades now. Yes, I do not look that old, but it is something that I'm quite passionate about. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it for so long. So just a fun fact about moi. When I was actually born premature, and for the first couple of months of my life, I was stone cold deaf. Couldn't hear nothing. My mom actually started figuring it out when she would literally sat next to me and call me. I wouldn't respond to anything. So my ears hadn't actually fully developed, so they had to put stuff in my ears to pop it out. And also, unlike my voice that you currently hear, I used to be suffering with severe stuff that you just got a glimpse of. So if that rears its ugly head, just like bear with me, it does have a tendency to pop up at the least opportune times. So as we just demonstrated, we have a tendency to talk a lot about accessibility. It's a very fun topic, and it's a very common topic. And some would say it's a very popular topic at the moment. What we rarely talk about is how to talk about accessibility. Because it's very easy to, give that chat to people, but how do we actually convey that message properly? So some time ago, I got into the office early on a Monday morning. I get there very early. I tend to use the morning hours to do my admin, get in there, get those emails out, eat the frog as they would. And I'm an early bird, so I get in there around 6, 6:30. And I had just made myself, I don't know how many of you get into these corporate offices, but they have the most disgusting coffee machines. If you know, you know. And I made these things just to get myself settled in, opening it up. And I have a habit of getting stuff in the background to listen to. And at that point, are you all familiar with Figma configs? So Figma has this, it's basically Figma's version of TED Talks. So every year they have these series of videos where people have a conference and they talk about a random things. It's either design related or UX related or design systems related. And it's kind of near the end of it. So I saw a playlist and went through to something to put on in the background while I answer my mails. And one of them was around accessibility. And I think the title was something like Sell Accessibility Like a Pro. And I was like, okay, awesome. I love accessibility, don't we all? And I put it on and I went about my things. But as it went on, and I'm consuming this disgust office coffee, the speaker went through the typical things that you would normally, the questions that we literally now just went through, talking points that we've all heard 1,000 times. And I actually went, the more I listened to this, I actually started getting annoyed. And I couldn't really actually figure out why at that time. And it got to the point that I actually forgot that I was supposed to be sending out emails. I stopped listening because maybe I was misunderstanding. I rewound it and I started listening from the start. And I noticed that with many things mentioned throughout this talk, like a crazy person, she started speaking out loud to the screen at this person. And the thing that I found myself saying most of the time is, what do we do with this information? It struck a tad of a nerve because I know, especially within the UX framework, we tend to do this a lot. And this is a little pickle that we run into a lot of the times, is when we talk to our peers, our devs, our stakeholders, our BAs, and everything like that, I have seen that we tend to give these accessibility information that we've just given with a bit of an attitude. And that attitude is just as a trust me, bro, type of vibe. Give a little bit of a, I am the expert, you're just supposed to take my word for it. So, okay, I think this will work better with a bit of an example. So the speaker starts out with an awesome number, 1.3 billion. That is the number of people in the world with a disability. Just to give you a tad bit of context, that's about 16% of the world population, okay? And also to put that in perspective, that's more than the population of China, okay? Why bring this up? It's a good selling point, isn't it? That's a lot of people. 1.3 billion people. That's a huge margin of people that you're probably neglecting if you don't make your products accessible. But do we really use this information? What can I do with it? When you say 1.3 billion people have a disability, okay, that's awesome. But can we be in specifics? What types of disabilities? Not all disabilities are created equal. Are we talking about a permanent disability versus a temporary disability? It's not the same. Which of these disabilities actually affect digital products, your products? Someone who's in a wheelchair is not going to have the same problem that someone that's blind have with your product. So the more important question that was also never properly answered in this talk, as this guy went on and on, is how do we cater to these disabilities? Now, the speaker says many times, your product has to be accessible. But what does that mean? Seriously, from an implementation point of view, what does that actually mean? How do we even begin to fix the problem? And then after the numbers, my disgusting coffee being at its end, the speaker actually brought up a cool graphic, which caught my attention. Now, this is a slide where it's like, this is the most commonly encountered usability problems that we see on the web. So we have 81% contrast, alt text, input labels, empty links, empty buttons, and doc language. Now, the first two, easy enough, assumedly. We all know what a lack of contrast as a problem can refer to, and we can all kind of guess what the lack of alt text can be a problem. What about input labels? Anyone tell me what he's referring to when he says an accessibility issue regarding input labels? That's a cool answer. The problem is the guy didn't say. That's the problem.
Could we just have whoever said that in the
Sorry, I think just
like using
audible online?
sorry. Okay, so I don't understand this properly.
Yes.
Is it saying 81% of websites have a contrast problem?
Yes. Yes, that's a lot. 44% or 46% have input labels, 44 empty links, 28 empty buttons. We can use can anyone tell me what doc language means and why that's a problem? And this is kind of getting to the issue that I had was, this is what was bothering. This is why I was getting frustrated. I was actually getting officially triggered the more this went on. Because if we can't properly communicate the problem, how do we expect our peers and people that we work with to actually help us fix it? So just to cover some groundwork first, to understand accessibility, as we all know, I might be preaching to the choir, but let's just, for the sake of just covering our grounds, disability is any condition of the body or the mind that makes it more difficult for the person of that condition to do a certain activity and interact with the world around them. So we have different accessibility types, as we know, and not all of the disabilities fall within the realm of digital accessibility, which is really important. But for the sake of this, I'm not really going to be splitting hairs. So we have motor, visual, auditory, and cognitive disabilities that we have to cater for. The subcategories, as we've actually kind of just covered in our our icebreaker, involves things like paralyzation for keyboard navigation, muscular dystrophy, a broken wrist, temporary versus permanent. Blindness, low vision, color blindness, deafness, reduced hearing, dyslexia, ADHD, autism, and epilepsy. All of these things are things that we have to take in mind. But now, just for the sake of easiness, and this is where audience participation comes in. Colorblindness is one of our most affected kind of accessibility issue that most of us springs to mind first. So for virtual Monopoly 50 bucks, can anyone tell me how many different types of colorblindness? Four. Okay. Compliments of apps are back. Okay, but now, question number 2. It's trickier, so you can go double or nothing. Okay. Can anyone tell me the percentage of each of these that fall within the population? Can be in South Africa or in the world, doesn't really matter. Can you just wager a guess out of these? You had to sign a percentage. Which one would they fall?
One.
Okay.
It's less than 1%.
Okay. Love. Wager a guess.
Uh, 13% trying to know them.
So how it turns out is all the colorblindness people who suffer from colorblindness, 62% is the most common, it's the red-green blindness. Then we have a blue-yellow, and then, Esty, I think you're correct, under 1% has monochrome. Well, technically under 1% for the blue-yellow colorblindness. So the reason why I bring this up is we have now a question of how do we handle this? How do we cater for these specific people? An easy answer would be is like you make everything purple and yellow, because that caters for every single color blindness there is. But I've seen these talking points come up like a lot of the times, and my problem is that it never really extends past, don't do that. Don't put blue and green next to each other. That's bad UX, I guess. Go on your merry way. And sure, yes, that's true, but it's a tad surface level. I think as a UX community, I think we can do a bit better. We can make the information that we give over to others a tad more useful. So just as basically to cover your bases, here are some simple practices, like most of which you will probably know, but it's just if you cater for these things, I think 90% of your issues will be covered. So colors, as they say, avoid the following color combinations: red, green, yellow, blue, and black, but make sure that information such as success, error message, or links can be identified without relying purely on color. Oops. High contrast, as we've spoken before, is high contrast between the background color and text. Normal text, 4.5 to 1. If you're going large text, 3 to 1 is probably your best bet. Typography, sans serif, typeface, Arial, open sans, all those pretty ones that we always obsess about. As these fonts are easier for people to decode with dyslexia. Text sizes should probably be northward of 14 to 16 points. Use left justified text as far as possible, and aim to have between 60 and 80 characters within your web page. It took Wikipedia almost a decade to get that one right. Media, as we mentioned also in our icebreaker, include alternative text such as audio or video. Make sure that they are not set on autoplay. Dyslexia and visually impaired people. Offer a transcription to audio and video content. For graphic elements, these are the nice little pretty pictures in the background, not actually in your actual content. Images that are used for decorative purposes should not be announced by a screen reader. Imagine how confusing that can be. Screen readers interpret the underlying structure of digital content, such as headings, lists. Make sure your graphic alt text makes sense in context. Time and motion. Avoid flashy, unexpected animations, no more than 3 seconds, unless the content is small or of low contrast. This is for people with seizures and epilepsy, autism, and elderly people. Technical aspects and alt text, links, buttons should always have a description via tags and inputs associated with labels to be identified by screen readers. Also standard practice for search engine optimization. Validate the markup to make sure that all browsers can read your code. And make sure that your website and web app is usable with a keyboard only. Well, now that's the fun stuff that we all know. But now, the problem that we have here is I don't want to give the impression that everything in this talk is triggering to me, like, and I just find a problem with everything. The speaker that I was listening to was actually very, very passionate, and I love to see it. And he does say some of the quiet parts out loud, such as that we lack empathy for each other. The problem that we have is we tend to focus that only on our users. Very rarely focus that same attention to our peers, the people we work with. We expect from them to care about things that we care about. We spoke about this earlier when we came in. We want them to meet us halfway. We want them to understand our language without us learning theirs. And we need to speak their language, and we need to understand the things that they care about. I'm not saying it's easy, and it's hard work. Good communication is a soft skill that we spend almost pretty much our entire careers, trying to develop, for some more than others, I can tell you that. So when talking to our stakeholders, trying to convince them of not only accessibility, but UX maturity, I think there's a couple of different tactics that we can try. So I've seen a couple of these come up, but depending on who you talk to, you can try a couple of these. So visual design principles. When you argue according to visual design principles, this is why we need accessibility. It is a tried and true method, and it is probably the most quickly feedback of them. It's, hey, pretty thing is much more convincing than an ugly thing, isn't it? Design principles take something like this and turns it into this. I was quick for those, but some of these things, and this is a real site. I've been on it. And it takes it to something like this. So, and as I say, the result speaks for themselves. However, so one would think, because you have like this quick feedback and the results speak for itself, would think that is a open and shut case. Just show people, and there it is. But has anyone ever worked in a marketing or a branding studio of any kind? Be the first to know that the response can sometimes be that design is subjective. What we find pretty is not the same thing as what other people find pretty. Have you ever seen how the most popular websites in India look? You cannot make something like this in India. It will fail. Because that's not what they're used to. It's not their convention. So this means that visuals are subjective. And if it's subjective, your argument falls flat. So that now becomes hard to argue. So the next thing that we try is empathy. This is a tried thing that we love to argue from a UX standpoint. It's basically the core foundation of the UX practice is to have empathy for our users and bring that empathy into our designs. So personas, archetypes, and all of these things are great. They are great in theory. But if we don't show the empathy for our stakeholders and our devs, who's this now? Ranesh. That's okay. It's on the screen. But it's not a perfect world. In a perfect world, if we can just use empathy, everyone would sing Kumbaya and we would do everything the right way. But it's not. We can't all be empaths, no matter how much we would like the world to be. And trust me, the world's best and most researched persona will not instill empathy where it's just not going to be. I'm not saying we shouldn't use things like persona. It's a great tool and it's a tried and true tool. But I've seen how they fall on deaf ears. and Esty can attest to this. You can send out emails, you can plaster posters all over the office. Sometimes people just don't have empathy. And it makes sense. Think of a persona. It's hard enough to have in common with another human being. Now you have to have in common with another human being that's on a poster. You've never met before in your life. You have to memorize all of the things the UXer has now laid upon this chart, and you have to spend your precious time while you're supposed to be doing other things and study that. It's a great idea in principle, but it's not always the easiest thing for people other than UXers to adopt. So what is something that's easy to adopt? Data is wonderful. All of that fails, and you struggle with empathy with other people, and you struggle with visuals. Data is a good way to get your point across. And it's especially great for your devs. Devs tend to be hard facts people. And if you want to help your devs understand and why they have to take the enormous amount of time to make your product of any kind accessible, and believe me, it takes an enormous amount of time to make your product accessible. How about you communicate it to them? This is also very persuasive for stakeholders, how things go over time, data points. It's very hard to argue with data. Devs also respond to clear definitions and terminology. When things are set in stone, it's very, very hard to argue. Now, I wish I could tell you that this is all you need, and this is now the end of the slideshow, and we can all go home. But as some of you might know, even the holy grail of data can be dismissed. Some people dismiss it as edge cases. They question your research methodologies. They'll question anything of, you know what, our user base just might be different. I know them. I have done the groundwork. I've spoken to these people, and no. So our hands are tied. It's not that crucial. We need to get this out as soon as possible. These are the things that your stakeholders tend to love to say to you. So we've all heard this before. So what now? Do we admit defeat? Save it for another time? You can always do it later, even though we know, at least from data points, that to make your product accessible later is 10 times more expensive than if you had to do it from the beginning. Literally 10 times more expensive. So while I was nearing the end of this talk, something hit me, came up a few times that I've rarely heard before when it comes to the topics of accessibility and how to communicate it. And it was something that until that time, within the realm of accessibility, is quiet. No one talks about it. It's recently become a bit of a topic, especially in Europe, and that is the fact that if you're not accessible, you could get sued. If that doesn't perk up your stakeholders' ears, I have no idea what will. Now, I only did a year of paralegal studies before I dropped out and gone on to the greener pastures of design. But I am pretty sure that you have to mess up extraordinarily for you to get sued for accessibility, and it has happened. So my question was to this random person on the screen who was talking about these things is how? How do you get sued? Why would you get sued? Nothing. Just again, trust me, bro. So, and this is the problem that I keep running into, is half information. So my ADHD, the little bit that I have, kicked in, and I went to get another disgusting cup of coffee and went down a teeny little bit of a rabbit hole, and I actually looked at how you could get sued for your accessibility. And I stretched my Google skills and found some interesting numbers for you that you could maybe take home and have a bit of a null. If you feel that, if you're passionate about accessibility, but you find that people are not, and you feel that it needs to be taken a bit more seriously, have a look at this. So Lawsuits. Lawsuits have pretty much doubled in, I think, the last 7 years around accessibility. Most of these are in Europe. They are very stringent on their laws. But like the demand for the USB-C cable for Apple, Europe has a way of making its problems the rest of the world's problems. Like it doesn't take that long. So what we can look at is 95% of accessibility lawsuits involve desktop websites or web apps. So if this is one of your products, you can have a bit of a look at that. 84% of those are related to e-commerce, and it's closely followed by insurance. I work for Discovery, so, or at least my client is Discovery, so this hits particularly home. And 30% involve the use of accessibility overlays. So does anybody know what accessibility overlays are? Okay, this is actually quite funny. So these accessibility overlays are a broad term for technologies that aim to improve accessibility. So what they do is they are widgets that often encounter, they are third-party overlays. You can basically think of them as plugins that do the hard work for you and make your site or your web app accessible. Problem is that a lot of them are not good, and it ends up that they actually fail, where they bug out and then people get lost. And in the grand sense of irony, 30% of these mentioned lawsuits involve these like overlays failing. And apparently these widgets encounter issues not fully addressed, and it's particularly bad for people that's visually impaired. So of all of these stats, one final stat that you can maybe look into is that of all these lawsuits, 92% of them are successful, and they pay out. Some of them pay out more than others, but they pay out. So if you are unfortunate enough to get sued, the chances are that your client will not be a happy chappy at the end of the day. So now, do I mean you have to go and run to your clients right now and with fire and brimstone and say, oh my God, the world's going to end. We need to like stop everything. No, that's not what I mean. It was just a bit of a drastic way to say that how we talk about these things. If one thing doesn't work, try other avenues. Become a little bit more aware and empathetic of the people that you are talking to, not just our users. We can't expect others to think the way that we do. And like how we strive to understand our users on a daily basis, is no different to our stakeholders, our devs, our testers, our BAs, and yes, even our fellow UXers. And I would say especially our fellow UXers, because we are the ones that carries the flag forward. And this is not just about accessibility, but UX as a maturity and as a discipline. Because I say so can't be good enough. It can't just be, you can't put red next to green. It's superficial, that doesn't get the message across. Understand your craft, learn to communicate it efficiently to other people. And if you are lucky, won't 100% fix the problem, but maybe it'll get you a tad closer to actually making your website or your web app or your product more accessible. If you would like, everyone has access to the WCAG guidelines. I have a little bit of resources that for any of you that's on your daily basis that I use, contrast checker, design standards, and everything like that. Any questions? Yes.
Can you talk about the failing on the overlays?
Yes.
Are those end user overlays, or are they tools used by designers to kind of trigger the system to make it?
It's tools used by devs. So you can, anybody familiar with jQuery? Yeah. Now in the old days, you would have a Java library, and jQuery plugs in the Java within your website to make certain things happen. Same principle.